In part 2 of our scripting tutorial, we're going to look at local variables and how to set them and retrieve them, and that's really useful for a lot of different things. We're going to use it to keep track of how many times this character is speaking, and when we do that, we're going to take a look at a different script that we haven't looked at before, which is called the onSpawn script. Let's begin by right-clicking on our character, our singer, and we'll go to Properties. Over to the Scripts tab, and remember before we have cleared out all of the scripts except for the onHeartbeat, and we're going to change that one in a little bit. But first, let's find the script called onSpawn. onSpawn is a script that happens right at the beginning of the game when the character is created for the first time. And so it only runs once. The Heartbeat script runs every 6 seconds, so it repeats itself, but the onSpawn script only runs one time, which makes it ideal for setting up, initial conditions that you want to have at the start of the game or the start of the area. So let's click on the Edit button next to onSpawn, and we'll begin writing our script. The script in onSpawn here is going to be very short. It's going to be one line, and what we're going to do is we're going to set up a local integer variable, a number variable. Let's look in the Filter tab here under Functions and type in set local int. When we click on it from the functions list, we can see how it's supposed to be written. And I've touched on this before in the previous tutorial series, but let's take a look again. Whenever you see these blue highlighted words here, those aren't things that you're going to type in your code. These are just explaining what type of item we're looking at in each spot. So let's start over here on the left. First of all, it says void, and then it says the name of the function, set local int. This void is a return type. Anything written before the name of the function is a return type. And since it's void, it means this function doesn't return anything. And what that means is it does its job and then it quits. It stops. Some functions come back after they're finished with a value, like an integer or some object. And then what you can do is you can catch that object and make use of it later. We'll see an example of that in the near future. But for now, we can ignore this because this one doesn't return anything. It returns void. Okay, then we have the name of the function. Then we have the parenthesis set. Open parenthesis here and a closed parenthesis here. And in between are what we call parameters. Sometimes these are called arguments. And sometimes there's 1, sometimes there's none, sometimes there's 7. Every time you see a comma, that's the separation between the next parameter. So in our case, we have 3. First of all, we have an object that, in the description anyway, it's named OObject. Next, we have a string called sVarName. And third, we have an int called nValue. Okay, so let's look at each one of these. The first one is an object, and this is going to refer to the object that we want to set the local variable on. So if you were able to reach into your game and grab any one of your objects, characters, NPCs, lots of objects that are placeables in the game, you could grab one of those in the code, get a copy of it, and then set a variable on it in this slot right here. Next is a string, which means it's going to be a text that we type inside of quotation marks. And it's called sVarName. What that means is this is supposed to refer to the name of your variable. That's what we're looking for. Finally, we have an int, or a number, called nValue. And this is the number value that we're trying to change our variable to, or trying to set it to. Okay? This will make a little more sense as we begin to write it. But also here in the comments, you have kind of an organized explanation. We're going to set OObject's local integer variable, which is called sVarName, to nValue. All right. Now again, when they call it OObject, sVarName, and nValue, those are just temporary names to explain how it works. We can name them whatever we want to. All right, let's begin writing our code. First of all, we type in the name of the function, set local int, open parenthesis. Now in our first slot, we have to give it an object. Now again, they called it OObject. We don't have to. All that means is this is referring to the object that you want to set the value for. Now, since this script is on our singer character, it's in the singer's on-spawn script, we can just put a little shortcut here called object_self. And that hopefully looks familiar to you from our previous tutorial series. And object self refers to whoever's calling the script. So in this case, it's the singer. So we're going to set a local int on the singer. And here, we need to give it a string that's supposed to be the name of the variable. All right, so if it ever says string, we have to put quotation marks. And then we're going to name this underscore, oops, I'm sorry, not underscore, caps lock, singer underscore count. Okay, that's standing in for svar name. That's what that is. It's the name of our variable, singer count. Finally, we have to give it an int value. They called it n value. We're just going to type in a number here. And what do we want to set it to? And for us, we're going to set this value to 0. So type in a 0, close the parenthesis, and finish with a semicolon. And that's all we're going to do for this script. Set local int on object self, which is the singer. Name this variable singer count, and set it to 0. All right, let's save this script. We're going to call it SM for scripting module underscore singer underscore OS for on spawn, and click save. Okay, we can close that. And now we're going to go over to our heartbeat and we're going to edit that. We're going to get rid of the annoying song that we've been listening to this whole time. And instead, we're just going to have this character explain to us how many times it's counting and what it's saying. So we can clear out all that. Now, actually, we're going to begin before the script starts. So hit return in front of the void main and give yourself some room here. And up at the top, we're going to create a variable in the code right here, just a temporary variable. And this variable will disappear when the script is over. It's not going to hang around and take up any memory. So the way that you do that is lowercase, int, we'll call it n count, and it equals, what we want to do is we want to find out what the current value of singer count is. Okay, remember we set up that variable on the on spawn. So as soon as our character appears in the game, that character has a variable called singer count, and it starts out with a value of 0. We want to retrieve that and get it, because every time this heartbeat runs, that variable might be different. It might not be 0. It's only 0 at the start. So in order to get it, we have to use a function called get local int. Get local int. If you click on it here, you can see how it works. And now, here we have a return type that's not void. This return type is int, which means this function, when it does its job, it finishes and it comes back with a number. And if you don't catch that number and make use of it, it just kind of floats away into the ether. And we're going to catch it and we're going to put it into ncount. It has two parameters. The first one is object o_object, and that's whatever object we're trying to find out for this variable from. And the next is a string for the variable name. Okay, so similar to what we did before. Let's start right here, and we're going to type in get local int, open parenthesis. Now, which object are we trying to find this int on? Well, it's the singer. But since this script right here is the heartbeat script, it's being called by the singer. So we can just, again, put object underscore self. And then the name of the variable is singer underscore count. Okay, now when I say that there's a return type of int and it comes back with a number, here's what happens. The computer reads this instruction and says, oh, I need to go get a local int. I need to look at whoever's calling this script right now, which is the singer, and I need to look for a variable called singer count. When I find that variable, I need to take the number that's inside of it And remember, that's 0 at the start. And I need to return that number. And when it returns it, it's like the number sits right here and it flies out of the front end in this direction. And it goes through the equal sign, and we catch it right here. And we put it in end count. So in other words, if singer count has a 0 in it, end count will pick up that 0, and then we can use end count in here. Okay, so end count now has a number in it. What are we going to do? We're going to say end count equals end count plus 1. Okay, we're just going to increase end count by 1. So if end count is 6, at this point it's going to become 7. 1 plus itself. Next, we're going to tell the singer character to speak a string. Action speak string. I have spoken. This is important. Put a space here, and then end your quotation marks. Next, we're going to put a plus symbol, and this is how you link up multiple strings together. It's also how you insert numbers into strings. We want him to say how many times he has spoken. So if he's spoken 3 times, we want him to say, I have spoken 3 times. The problem is integers are not strings. So end count, you can't just put end count here. It's a different type. Action speak string only knows how to put strings out there. So we have to convert end count into a string. Fortunately, there is a function that will do that for us. And that function is called int to string. And so we can even type that in right here. Int to, and you can see there's 3 different: int to float, int to hex string, and int to string. So we click on that. Here's how you use it. You type in the name, you give it an integer value, and it will come back with, it will return a string. If somehow there's a problem, it'll return an empty string. Just 2 quotes together, nothing. But if all goes well, it'll return that number in a string format. So we're going to put that function right here. Int to string end count plus space times. Close the parenthesis. Okay, now the reason we have to put these spaces in here, right here and right here, is because the computer wouldn't put them in. And if we didn't put those in, the sentence might look something like this. I'll write it in comments so it doesn't affect the code. I have spoken 3 times. It would look like that. So we're going to put in that space manually after spoken and before times, and that way the 3 will just drop in right in between 2 spaces. Okay. Okay, and then finally, remember we made a change here to end count, and singer count is the actual kind of official variable. End count is just our temporary one we're going to work with. So we need to now update singer count and say, oh yeah, by the way, singer count, you need to make yourself equal to whatever end count was at the end of this, because we started at like 2, ended up at 3. So end count is always increasing. All right, let's do this. We'll say set local int object self singer underscore count. And instead of typing in a number, like change yourself to 1 or 2, we're just going to put end count. In other words, we say to the object self, we say, hey, change your singer count variable to match end count. Okay? All right. That's all we need to add here. But I want to explain something really quickly before we test it. Why are we using end count? Why aren't we just using singer count all the time? Well, the reason is if you look at end count, look at how many times it's written. It's written here, 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 and here. It's written 4 times in this code. And, if we didn't use this little shortcut, it's kind of like a nickname for our variable. We would have to put this block of code everywhere we see it. And that just makes the code look strange. So this right here, this line, if I wanted to write that without using end count, I'd have to write it like this. I'd have to say set local int object self singer underscore count. And here's the tricky part. I want it to set it to itself plus 1. So I'd have to say get local int object self singer underscore count plus 1. And this begins to get really unwieldy, and there's just a lot of extra text there. So if you just find out what it is and put it into a little variable like end count, then we can modify end count very easily throughout the script, and then at the end we'll just update singer count with whatever end count changed to. So it just ends up saving a lot of extra typing, and it keeps it easier to understand and simpler. Okay, let's save this and let's test our module. Okay, I have spoken 1 times, and then we wait 6 seconds till the heartbeat script fires again. I have spoken 2 times. Okay, and this guy will continue to do that as long as this computer runs. We could leave it for 10 years and he'd still be talking. Okay, let's go back into our script. I'm sorry, exit. Now, let's go in and let's see, we'll go over here to the heartbeat script. And if you are a grammar perfectionist, you probably were bothered by the fact that he starts out saying, I have spoken 1 times, which doesn't make any sense in proper English. How do we fix that? Well, what we can do is use what's called an if statement to figure out, if end count is a 1, because that's the only time we don't want to use the plural of times. Okay. And if it is, we'll do it 1 sentence, and if it's not a 1, if it's anything else, we'll use this one. So here's how we'll write this. If, oops, stuck in all caps again, if end count is equal to 1. Now you need to put in 2 equal signs. If you put in 1 equal sign, that's called the assignment operator, and that actually will set end count to 1. So if end count is 7, and you say if end count equals 1, end count will become 1, and that's not what we want. If you have 2 equal signs, that's a test to see if it is equal to 1. Okay, so 2 equal signs, that's important. We're going to hit return. We're going to put in curly braces. Again, this is the one next to the P, not parentheses. These are curly braces. Okay, so if it is a 1, we're going to say something different. Action speak string. This is the first time I have spoken. This is a really interesting character, isn't it? Now, after the if is done, we'll type in the word else. And then, again, more curly braces below that. And let's highlight this instruction line here and move that into the else. Okay? If end count is 1, he'll say this line. In any other situation, he'll say this line. And that will save us the headaches of dealing with a person that can't speak correctly. And just real quickly, if an if statement is false, the computer is forced to do whatever is inside the else. You're making the computer choose one or the other in this one. If it's true, it does this one. If it's false, it does this one. Now, if the else statement was gone, then it works like this. If it's true, it says this. If this is false, it says nothing. It would just skip it. Okay, but I actually do want to leave that in there, so we'll leave it like that. Save your script, and we'll give this guy a test. This is the first time I have spoken. Can you imagine meeting somebody like this in the forest? I have spoken 2 times. He's the most boring person on the planet. And he's just kind of in his underpants, which is also weird and awkward. So, all right, that's it for our second lesson. And in lesson 3, we're going to learn about more of these conditionals, ifs and elses. And those are really powerful because once you get into using if and else to control the situation, you can find out what the situation is in the game, and you can have your characters react differently depending on what they see and what they observe. We'll cover that in tutorial 3.